How do you react when you feel that you're in danger? Do you freeze up? Do you want to run away? Or is it more in your nature to face a threat and fight it? On this episode of the GeoTrek podcast, we will discuss the details of fight, flight, freeze neurobiology with Erica Peng, a lecturer at UC Berkeley. Hey everyone, I'm Hurricane Hal, host of the GeoTrek podcast, where we explore the world to bring you stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow our content on social media and your favorite podcast platform. You also do not want to miss out on our growing YouTube channel, where you can watch a video episode of each and every GeoTrek podcast. Now, a more formal introduction of this episode's guest. Erica Peng has been a lecturer at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business since 2016. She teaches about how defensiveness and resistance from our automatic fight, flight, freeze neurobiology undermines leaders and teams from being effective in uncertainty and crisis when high performance and collaboration are most needed. This topic is very relevant to professionals and residents living and working in high-risk disaster areas, including hurricane zones, areas with frequent severe weather, and areas with high fire danger. But without further introduction, let's jump into this GeoTrek podcast episode with Erica Peng. Erica, thank you so much for taking time to join us on the GeoTrek podcast.
Yes, I'm so excited to continue our conversation.
Erica, in very simple terms, how does neurobiology influence fight, flight, freeze reactions in people? Could you explain that to us?
Yes. So neurobiology, it's a mouthful. And it's a technical word, but it really just refers to the miraculous biological structures and systems that we all have, it's part of our nervous system that drives our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior to keep us alive. And the nervous system is our brain, our spinal cord, nerves. And the spinal cord, it's like the main communication highway between the brain and the rest of the body. So there's a thin bundle of nervous tissue, about as thick as a finger, and it runs from the base of our brain down to the lower back through the spinal column. And along its length, there are pairs of nerves that branch out to the rest of the body. And in terms of fight, flight, freeze, only one of the functions of our neurobiology is an alert system. And when the brain detects or anticipates a threat, it sends a chemical message throughout our body through the nerves to prepare our body to protect from a potential threat. So this is what drives our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, even before conscious thought even realizes that there might be a threat.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I had never even really heard of neurobiology until I heard you speak at the APCIA conference in Dallas in June of 2026. And so this is really fascinating to get more into this. And I was curious when I heard you speak on it. I mean, you've done a lot of work on this. You've taught over 1,500 business leaders, social entrepreneurs, and senior teams how to navigate fight, flight, freeze reactivity. So before we get into more details about this fascinating topic, could you share us what's your professional path into this? This is a really interesting topic. How did you become interested in this field of study?
Thanks for asking. It is a journey. It's a story. And I will just say our fight, flight, freeze response, it's rooted in this fast acting system, right? And they're just different strategies, different ways of responding to a perceived threat to increase the chances of our survival. So that's just sort of the lead into my story. And I stumbled into this, not because it was a topic that interested me, but it was really my own struggles with a chronic fight, flight, freeze response that I wasn't even aware that I had growing up, but it was limiting me much later in life, communication, relationships, in my ability to fulfill my own goals and aspirations. And, we think of threats often as external, right? Like in your work, hurricanes or wildfires or a burglar, but our brain also perceives social threats. And in my case, the threat came from my own self. So I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and I was the only Chinese kid in my school until 6th grade when I started middle school. And even then, there was only one other kid then in my grade. So I was the only one who was racially different amongst everyone else who was Caucasian. And my brain perceived being Chinese as a threat to being excluded or rejected, because we humans, we're social organisms, right? We cannot survive alone if we're ejected from the tribe. So in my case, I wasn't excluded. I had friends, I was popular, but the risk of being excluded or left alone because I was different evoked a threat response, even though, there wasn't necessarily a threat to my survival. And, I wasn't conscious of any of this. This was just what was happening. And, clearly I couldn't get away from the fact that I was Chinese. So I was carrying around the threat. And that, I think, in hindsight, created like a chronic threat response, which resulted in things like insomnia, social anxiety, fulfilling other people's expectations. And, I internalized this sense that being Asian wasn't cool and being white was better. And I was never going to be that. So, it also came up in low self-esteem or just a general sense of not being a good enough. And I struggled with this in my life. And it took many years of a self-directed education process, seeking approaches or having life experiences to help me. And I stumbled upon, it was really body-based practices that began to shift this, because these things about ourselves, they're not just thoughts in our mind, right? It affects our nervous system. It's in our body, and it becomes, it can become deep habits of how we carry ourselves in life, or even the tone of our voice. So, when I found some things that helped me, fast forward when I started to work with leaders and business students, I was shocked that so many of them struggled with similar things, different circumstances, but, imposter syndrome, insecurity, inner critic. So I just started sharing things that were most helpful for me, and people were very interested. They wanted more. And that really motivated me to synthesize what I was sharing into more of a formal methodology that's grounded in neuroscience and practices to shift and transform some of the entrenched limiting beliefs and behavior.
Erica, this is such a powerful story, I think, for me, partly because it's rooted in your personal background and your history, right? Starting with like perceived social threat, but then how this carried through. And it sounds like you didn't even make some of these connections until your adult life. But what's interesting to me, too, is that you saw similar insecurities and fears in other people, but this didn't paralyze you. Like it made you curious. It sounds like you wanted to understand this personally, and then you've been able to kind of pivot that and help so many other people by like taking what you've learned, and it sounds like, sharing it with others that have maybe insecurities, fears, maybe for different reasons, but they're still present, right?
That's right. I mean, it does feel like my life purpose. I didn't learn any of this. Most people I work with didn't learn this, and a lot of the research wasn't there when I was younger. But even though there's more popular research, what I think is missing is helping to translate that into just really practical applications to help us in life and relationships or work and teams. So it's very fulfilling. And yeah, this is my kind of inspiration.
Yeah, well, it's a very beautiful story and powerful. But what I got from hearing you speak in Dallas was what you just shared, how applied in nature this is. You've taken this work to say, okay, there's not only theory behind it, there's not only conceptual science behind it, but there's applied science. There are action items. There are things you can do to help improve your outcomes. And that's what I think, is going to be really exciting to uncover on this podcast episode, getting deeper into this fight, flight, freeze reactivity and how we can understand the role of neurobiology. I wanted to ask you this next, so are there both benefits and cost with the fight, flight, and freeze reactions? Like, for example, in some ways, do they help us? In other ways, do they hurt us? I mean, what's the trade-off there, and how do we see both positives and negatives coming from this type of reactivity?
Yeah, great question. Obviously the benefit of our fight, flight, freeze response and why it's evolved to this point is it helps us take action in case there might be a threat. And I just want to add, we refer to this system as fight, flight, freeze, and even that's a mouthful. But I want to add two other survival responses that are important. One is appease, we might hear, and that is more like behaviors of deference and accommodating, particularly around the social threats, right? This wouldn't be like a predator necessarily, but maybe a person of authority that might be a perceived threat. So that's appease. And there's another one, which is really more like shutting down, a collapse. And that's when there's really no hope of fighting or fleeing, that the attack or injury is imminent. And so now my whole system is just shutting down. So I'm not going to perceive the pain that might be involved. So just wanted to name those since we kind of use the catchphrase, fight, flight, freeze.
So it sounds like there's kind of a range of different responses and reactions, but it comes to I'm perceiving a threat and a risk to myself and basically how do I mitigate or reduce this risk perhaps?
That's right. And we're not thinking about it. It happens so fast. We're not actually consciously choosing a strategy, right? The brain is determining that based on the nature of the threat, our past experience, whether escape is possible, things like that. But you asked about the costs, and one other part of this system is in a threat response, the brain will jump to conclusions and generate assumptions and beliefs that are often false, again, to get us to act. So, one quick example that's very common, you're out on a trail, you hear a rustle in the grass, and you probably either freeze immediately or jump out of the way without even thinking about it, right? And you don't take the time to do due diligence. You don't get down on your hands and knees and, is it the wind? Is it a rodent? Is it a snake? What kind of snake? No, it's just within a microsecond, your brain has sort of come up with a conclusion that there is a threat there. So the cost is we often react to someone or something when there is no danger. And that can get us into trouble because some of the behaviors that play out in a fight, flight, freeze threat response are things like we get defensive, we criticize, blame others or blame ourselves. We can get self-righteous. We can shut down or withdraw, diminish ourselves, diminish others, right? And that's where there can be a cost to communication, to leadership, to teamwork, to collaboration, to responding with clear thinking in response to a crisis or a natural disaster.
It sounds like really that first phase for many of us is reactive and it's subconscious. It's almost immediate. It sounds like you're saying.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And it sounds like you're saying that can help us in some ways. If we're on a hike and there's a venomous snake in high grass, that could save our lives. But then it sounds like in other situations, all of a sudden we may react inappropriately, maybe to a perceived threat that wasn't even really there.
Exactly. And I think, again, coming out of my personal struggle for decades with this, once I stumbled upon an article, it really was an article about fight, flight, freeze. It explained to me what was going on and that I wasn't crazy. And it just felt so important to, now that I knew some of these things and had stumbled upon practices that I was already doing that had been helping me to really share this with other people.
Well, that must have felt very validating. Like, hang on a second. Some of these things I've struggled with, others have struggled with it. There's research on it. There's almost hope, right? There's a path forward. Like, as you understand this and apply it, it can help your life.
That's right. And not only that, I think this is the common denominator among all of us, no matter what our circumstance, no matter what race, socioeconomic class, where we live, language, country, culture, right? This is the human response. This is our survival instinct, right? Yeah. So.
No, for sure. And, so many applications to our personal lives, our relational lives. And just to pivot a bit here, connecting this with disasters, you live in El Sobrante, California, an area that's very fire prone. So you're living on the wildland urban interface where we see a lot of those trees and grasses come right up to the built environment, in a neighborhood that has 80 homes on a dead end with a lot of, I think you have more than 20,000 acres of trees and grasses near you. So again, obviously very fire prone. How does living in a high risk disaster area like this help you connect research with fight, flight, freeze, threat response, with wildfire preparedness? I mean, you're in this unique, interesting environment, and you're studying a lot of neurobiology and understanding fight, flight, freeze, threat response. How do those two worlds connect?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I mean, this really is a huge focus of my time, my attention, my work, and my passion, really. I wish I could show you a picture of, just what I look at the top of my driveway. It's just, eucalyptus grows, acres, thousands of acres, eucalyptus, oaks, brush, chaparral. And for the last 3 years, I've been leading efforts in my neighborhood to be better prepared for not just wildfire, but just emergencies in general. And this included applying for and getting a $50,000 grant to reduce flammable vegetation and to increase neighbors' involvement. So, now we have some financial support, which reduces a barrier, which a lot of us talk about. There's a huge financial barrier to reducing flammable vegetation and things on properties, right? And in my neighborhood, there's definitely a set of early adopters who are ready. And I wasn't actually one of them necessarily. But there's also resistance and, defensiveness or denial. And the current approach to wildfire mitigation is to provide more information and knowledge and fire science. And all of that is really important. But that alone is not enough, because as we're understanding, it's a myth that behavior is rational. Yeah. And we're giving out the information and education, but it's not necessarily translating into the desired behavior change. So there's a researcher that I use in my work, in my teaching, David Rock. He founded the Neuro Leadership Institute. And he writes about how change is pain. Change is experienced by the brain as pain physiologically. And the reason is physical pain and emotional distress that change involves, they have overlapping neural pathways. So if you think about change, even if it's change you want, it could be changing diet, a healthier diet or exercise. We want these things, right? Our New Year's resolutions. But, there's can be some uncertainty involved, and effort. And that can be enough to sort of evoke some emotional distress. So that's some of the research, right? And apply that now to wildfire mitigation. It involves change. It requires change. It requires removing plants, our beloved garden, our rose bushes, some of them right next to the house. And you actually, we've heard about loss or feelings of grief from cutting down and removing our plants, right? And it's not in people's minds. It's physiologically real. But I think understanding the neurobiology piece and how change is painful, it helps me, be more compassionate and understand, this person isn't just trying to be difficult or, even though it might be frustrating, it's really coming from vulnerability, maybe overwhelm, fear, anxiousness, being numb and confused and wanting to act but not knowing where to start. That was really more me, like a freeze state. So I think it's important to understand what's happening, in the background.
Yeah, and I could see people saying, wait, so I'm supposed to tear up my rose bushes next to my house. I don't smell smoke. I don't see flames up on the mountain, right? This may never happen, right? So all of a sudden it's requiring action up front that can be painful for people or difficult either financially or emotionally, or maybe they're, very attached to their garden, for offsetting some disaster that may never happen. But we know when it does, all of a sudden those precautions play out hugely, right, for the whole community.
That's right. And what you're talking about is uncertainty. There's uncertainty, first about when the threat is going to arrive, and there's uncertainty about these actions that I'm taking. Are they really going to help in that moment? And David Rock also writes about certain circumstances that evoke a threat response, and uncertainty is one of them. And if you think about
Erica,
survival,
how have you been able to use this as a community leader to work with your neighbors, work with your community, and help them navigate some of these personal decisions of how they set up their property, what their yard looks like, helping the community be better prepared? How have you been able to, as a leader, engage with your neighbors?
Well, it's been, I think, so not only helpful, essential that I've known about this fight, flight, freeze neurobiology and understand that people are already in a threat response, right? From the uncertainty of not just wildfire, but economic uncertainty, political uncertainty, all the things happening in our lives. And so even approaching neighbors, just recognizing that whether we're conscious or not, most of us are not conscious of how much we're already activated from just what's going on in the world and our lives. So, even in our communications, I've made sure to frame everything as an offering of help to hopefully not evoke the threat response of, here's these things you need to do. We want you to do it. There's more pressure and expectation. But no, here's some offerings of help, whether it's a neighborhood work day, which was really one of our most successful strategies, or coordinating a chipping day with the county, which we're very lucky. Contra Costa County has funds to provide a chipper and an 18-person crew. We have to do the removal, but they will come and chip it and take it away, right? That's a huge barrier for people to remove some of that vegetation. So always coming, so we get perceived as support and help to, again, regulate that potential threat response.
So it sounds like these are steps you're taking with your community, and maybe as you get a grant or as you get local government support, things like this, I would imagine that helps, right? Like all of a sudden there's others involved. It's a community involved. It's not just you knocking on someone's door. Like it's maybe you're able to do this in partnership with a broader community.
Oh yeah, it's been essential. I mean, even getting the grant required partnership with our resource conservation district, and even getting the park district to send goats to do the weed abatement on the hillsides requires many relationships and partnerships. So.
Wait, I have to ask you, so they actually put real goats on the hillside to eat some of that vegetation?
They do. And I have to say, when we see the goats, it's a huge relief. And I think, again, to our neurobiology, just to see those little goats, munching away.
Like goats are so cute. Well, then, and here they have this functional role on reducing some of this vegetation in a high-risk fire area.
That's right.
Erica, I wanted to ask you, you had spoken at the APCIA conference about Firewise communities. Could you share what that means? And is your community a Firewise community? What does that mean for people that live in fire-prone areas?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this, because it is the reason why we're able to be doing this education and organizing. So a Firewise community, it's a neighborhood that's participating in the National Fire Protection Association's Firewise USA recognition program. So what does that mean? It's a voluntary process for communities. If you have at least 8 households, you can apply to access resources that help educate and organize the neighborhood to take action to reduce wildfire risk. And folks can find out more information about this at firewise.org. And in May 2023, that's what me and another couple neighbors did. We learned about Firewise and we thought we need to do something. And we just gathered a core group of neighbors together, got information. And I'll just say one of the first things that we did as part of the application process is they had us do a neighborhood walkthrough. So there was a group of maybe 6 or 8 of us walking through the community with this checklist to look at and identify and assess, what kind of structures are there in this neighborhood? What are the building materials? How flammable are they? How much vegetation is there? And, I said we're a dead end road, and we border a 250-acre park. So we're constantly walking down the street to get to the park. But I don't think any of us had ever walked through the neighborhood really looking that closely at the homes and the structures and the building materials and thinking about it in terms of ignition and wildfire. So yeah, even just raising awareness, Firewise as a resource and a structure has been so critical.
It sounds like a very thorough and detailed assessment, and starting out almost as a community, like to walk the neighborhood and assess, like, okay, where are the risk areas? It sounds like that's one of the first steps. But when you mentioned also there need to be at least 8 homes involved, so this is really it really is a community project.
That's right. So they build that in, right? Coming together as a group of neighbors. And I'll say, I think even before we got our letter back that we've become a recognized Firewise neighborhood, we had a county fire inspector who was the Firewise liaison come out and do a walkthrough on 2 properties. And one of the properties, I offered mine up, and he was able to actually point out, right there in front of us, oh, here are some ignition risks that you might not even realize, and here are some of the things you can do to mitigate that. And, we've all been filling up our green bins every week. But I don't think any of us had been really doing it in terms of reducing risk to ignition. It was just filling up the green bin. But
Erica, stop right there. When you say green bin, is this a bin where you can put vegetation, grasses, things like that, and they'll take it away for you?
They'll take it away. That's right. Every week. Okay. But doing it with reducing, ignition risk is really different than just kind of unconsciously filling that bin up. And that's what happened when we started getting educated about this.
So how did that feel for you, having an expert in, fire mitigation come and point out things? Did that feel in a way like that empowered you? Like, oh, now I understand and can assess my own property better. I mean, how did that feel, having that engagement?
It was a relief, and it was eye-opening. And a couple of things. We talked about how the brain makes up stories. One of the things he said to us was, you can't rely on firefighters necessarily to save your house. They're going to be saving something, but they may not be able to get to your house. It takes 14 firefighters to safely deal with, one structure. So he said that your best strategy is to do what you can now, reducing risk to your own property, and also getting to the mindset of being ready to leave if you do have to leave and evacuate. And I think disrupting that story that I think I was holding on to, I think in the back of our minds, we think, oh, we can call 911 and help will be here. Yeah. So that was really important. It was kind of a reality check, oh no, we have to be involved in this too. Right?
Well, and it sounds like it aligned you with reality that there may be different outcomes. Hopefully your house can be saved, but they're also speaking to, if it can't, you need to leave. It's giving you this range of options, which maybe is not what we want to hear, but in the moment, if it helps save your life or helps you have a better response, it's going to be a good thing. Erica, I wanted to ask you one more thing. For communities like a Firewise community, for neighborhoods that are getting better prepared, the community's working together, people are getting more knowledge about how to reduce fire risk. Do you see then a shift or a change in their fight, flight, freeze threat response? As people are better prepared or know more about a threat or are better educated, are there shifts in how they may respond to that?
It's hard to say. We haven't luckily had a wildfire, but every year we're in our 3rd year now. And we've had 3 chipping days each year, right? One a year. And there is more involvement every year. More people are getting engaged. It's getting more normalized. For years, we've had an annual block party. And 3 years ago, for the first time, we had a table with wildfire education information and photos of wildfires. And that's just become a normal thing. I think people recognize that, okay, there's going to be some information. We're going to talk about it. And people are definitely more engaged. I mentioned that work day, the neighborhood work day. I mean, that was really key, to pull in people who hadn't necessarily been involved and, maybe they didn't need or want help on their property, but they were willing to offer help. So I think thinking about different ways different people can get involved, not just having to, go out and remove a bunch of stuff or make changes to their homes, but help other people too.
Yeah, for sure. And coming together as a community. And I think also when you see the community working together towards something, it communicates that there is a risk there and we need to take action. Maybe for that new neighbor that moved in from out of state or something, like, wait, what? What is this workday about? Fire mitigation. Like all of a sudden, maybe they moved here from Florida or someplace that's more rainy and more humid. And all of a sudden, this makes it real. The fact that the community is taking it seriously, that you and others are taking leadership. All of a sudden, I think it would put it at the forefront of their mind. Erica, I wish we could keep going on. I could talk to you about this all day. I think this is fascinating to connect neurobiology with hazard risk and what you're doing in your community. I know our listeners are really going to enjoy this episode, and some of them may want to reach out to you. How can people find you online or reach out to you if they have follow-up questions?
Sure. I do have a website. It's ericapengconnects.com. So that's ERICAPENG Connects, CONNECTS.com. And there's information about my methodology, my work with leaders, business students, and particularly the fight, flight, freeze, the neurobiology piece of this approach.
Well, I know we've been seeing a lot of drought out west. I know there's concern about the fire season that we're in and going to continue to be in. So I'm just hoping for the best. I'm hoping you don't have any fire risk near you. If you do, though, I know the work that you've done with your neighborhood and community and the training you've done to so many leaders is going to help people have a better response to this. So hoping for the best for you. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And as we wrap up this episode of the GeoTrek podcast, I wanted to ask you, what's one last take-home message you'd like to share with our audience?
I think the take home is we respond in this way to, it's not just wildfire, it's any threat, whether it's real or perceived. And to really be able to mitigate it in the moment, it does take effort. It takes awareness and practice and discomfort. And we're a culture of, we're creatures of comfort, right? We don't really like discomfort. And often when we feel it, even if we're working on building a skill or something, when it starts to get hard, we like to stop. And in this kind of realm of learning how to regulate the nervous system and that fight, flight, freeze reaction, when we begin to feel the discomfort of the practice or the uncertainty, that's really the moment where we need to keep going.
For sure. And I love about the work you're doing, you're addressing human nature. And this could relate to someone in a fire zone, someone in a flood zone, someone who lives in an area without a lot of natural disasters, but maybe they have financial concerns or economic concerns or family relationship concerns. It sounds like really this topic of threat response, it really relates to everyone everywhere from what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, it's about being human and hopefully being a human in relationships and hopefully not only figuring this out to survive, but really to thrive and to be fulfilled, right? And to be able to fulfill our goals,
sure.
Our hopes, our collaborations.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's another thing I took from this episode, how you're working as a community, you're working in relationship. It sounds like progress in these areas involves coming together. So, Erica, thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast. We're excited to continue following your work and really hoping for the best for you and all of your community out there in California.
Thank you so much. And for you as well. And I'll thank you for the work that you're doing too, really.
Well, thank you so much, Erica, for sharing about your personal story and your path professionally to understand fight, flight, freeze, threat response. I really took away a few take-homes from this podcast that I'm going to apply to my life personally. Number one, I love that Erica shared her personal story of fight, flight, freeze, threat response by sharing stories and memories about the social context of her childhood. She mentioned that she felt she didn't fit in, and in some ways she felt socially threatened as a kid. I felt that made her very relatable and very personal. And it reminded me, we all feel threatened in many different ways through our lives, not just with natural disasters. So I thought that was really interesting and helped us understand how she got into this area of interest. It reminded me of other guests we've had on the podcast that say, when I was a kid, I was terrified about storms. So I wanted to learn everything I could about them. And here I am. I'm a meteorologist today. We've had guests before that had to face fears or threats in their life, and it actually shaped who they were personally and professionally. And that was the case here with Erica Peng. Number two, I thought it was really interesting that Erica shared the background of why biologically we have a fight, flight, freeze threat response. She mentioned if you're hiking through the woods and you hear a sound in the grass, it's human nature to want to react to that, right? We're afraid. What's there? Could it be a snake? Could it be a bear? It sounds like our biology trying to protect us by reacting to what we come across in life that we feel like is a threat. And this got me thinking personally about, this concept of fight, flight, or freeze. I know personally for me, I'm a very slow thinker, and I often freeze when I face a threat. A couple of years ago, I rented a car and I was driving through my community. I turned the corner onto a new street. It was at night, and all of a sudden I saw this huge object moving toward me. I didn't know what it was. It turns out it was another car with a drunk driver that was drifting towards me at 5 to 10 miles an hour. Because I froze, the car actually made contact with me and hit me. I wasn't in danger. I wasn't hurt. But I thought about it afterwards. It's my wiring is to freeze. And I thought, man, that served me well in that case. If I just immediately went into reverse and floored it, I might have hit someone. I might have been at fault. I might have caused more damage. So in that case, that kind of helped me. But it got me thinking, are there other settings where me freezing up could actually hurt me if I'm under a different kind of threat? So this conversation with Erica got me thinking personally, and I want to challenge everyone to really think about their own wiring. How do you react when you feel threatened to a disaster, when you feel threatened in life? How do you react? And also, how can you maybe better prepare? Erica talked about better preparedness can help us understand how we're wired and can also give us a better outcome. And that moves us into the third and final bullet point here from talking to Erica. I thought it was really interesting that she lives in a very fire-prone area. She and her neighbors are at risk for wildfire. I thought it's interesting that they're addressing this and mitigating this risk by coming together as a neighborhood and coming together as a community. They're actually really coming together socially. They're doing things to their properties to reduce risk. But I thought about this in the context of fight, flight, freeze. What they're also doing is breaking these bonds of isolation, right? Where she's talking to neighbors, she's talking to friends. They're better prepared. They're understanding risk better. They're breaking the isolation, and I think that's going to help them understand how they're wired and help them have a better outcome and a better response in the future as well. Just some takeaways that I got from this conversation with Erica Peng. Again, she mentioned how we can find her on social media. She does this a lot. She consults, she speaks to a lot of groups about threat response, really understanding how you're wired and some different responses you can have and ways that you can set yourself up for better outcomes when you face threats. We love bringing on guests like Erica Peng onto the GeoTrek podcast. We're consistently engaged with experts from around the world that are helping people mitigate disasters. And we also have storm survivors on the GeoTrek podcast as we explore the world and bring many episodes to you. Thanks again for your involvement and your support of our podcast. Really appreciate all the engagement with our fan base here. Thanks again. I'm your host, Hurricane Hal. I appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast.